Foz, welcome back.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me back.
Foz, Nemaura is focused on developing affordable diagnostic solutions and digital tools for a wide range of medical conditions. You're currently in the commercialization phase for a daily wearable continuous glucose sensor for people with diabetes. Let's talk more about this product and where you are in the commercialization phase.
Absolutely. So over the last almost a decade now, although it seems like a lifetime, we've been developing one platform technology which has the ability to measure various analytes. Now, despite that, we've focused entirely on glucose monitoring. The reason being that with glucose monitoring, not only do you have a vast market within the diabetes space, condition which unfortunately afflicts almost 500 million people around the world. In the US, you have around 35 million people with diabetes. So it's not just in that space, but also when you look outside of that space in the consumer space of pre-diabetes. If I take the US as an example again, you have almost 90 million people with diabetes in the US, with pre-diabetes in the US. And so that's why we selected glucose as the first analyte that we're going to be measuring. And so if I just give an example, so the product that we've developed is essentially a transmitter like so, which sits on the surface of the arm. And initially, you take a daily disposable sensor, and it is connected into the device like so. Click it in, peel off the backing layer, and you apply it to the arm. And then and so, although I don't have diabetes, fortunately, here's, for example, I can show you. I'm wearing the device today, and here's my reading. I've just had a hot chocolate, which I don't normally have, and it shows that my sugar level is going up. And so the question is, okay. So we have a continuous glucose monitor. That's our first product that we've developed. And we have CE approval as a Class IIb medical device in Europe to be able to sell this. The question is, therefore, what exactly is the purpose that this serves? Or what is the problem that it addresses? The key to managing diabetes, whether it's type 1, type 2, is to know what your profile looks like over the course of the day. That's really the key, and that's what empowers people to make the appropriate either lifestyle adjustments or medication intervention or other intervention to be able to bring those fluctuations under control. Because ultimately, it's the fluctuations, the degree of fluctuations that occur over the course of the day that actually lead to the long-term complications that we see, or it worsens those. So therefore, what we are doing here is providing an empowering tool to individuals to be able to go out there and monitor their sugar profiles over the course of the day. And more importantly, from the point of view of either, let's say, tracking pre-diabetes or managing type 2 diabetes in particular, given these are lifestyle-based, it is not critical for you to have a sensor on the arm every single day of the week. A bit like if you were to, let's say, if you're looking to lose weight and you go on a diet, you have a choice. You could go out there and you could actually log your weight twice a day for the next 90 days. Or you could just weigh yourself at the end of every month and you could see what progress you've made. Well, similarly here, what's been established in independent literature is that by monitoring just a couple of days at the end of the month, and then making the appropriate interventions over the course of the next month, and then again adjusting according to the profiles at the end of the month, clinically significant improvements have occurred in the way people manage their diabetes. So that's the space we operate in. And from a commercialization perspective, we're still in the process for helping our UK licensee launch the product in the UK market, which they're doing as part of a subscription service. And as it stands, we could launch the product in any European territory. So it's worth bearing that in mind. We could also launch in the Middle East, and there are certain other territories around the world where we can actually launch product. We haven't done so yet. From our perspective, there are two things we are trying to achieve prior to doing that. One is to ensure that we have helped our UK licensee establish their presence in the UK and get many testimonials, etc., that we can, showing the benefits that people are deriving from using the system.
Foz, could you please distinguish the difference between the two products, sugarBEAT and proBEAT?
So that's a really good question. Now, with the difference between sugarBEAT and proBEAT, they are exactly the same sensor, exactly the same device. with sugarBEAT, it's an approved medical device in Europe. It's a Class IIb medical device. proBEAT, however, is intended to be a consumer product. It is not an approved medical product. What happens there is that we take the data, we process it, and then we are able to provide feedback to individuals with respect to their blood sugar fluctuations. And the objective there is really to use it as part of a subscription-based service. And this is something that we will be talking about a lot more in due course, because we have been running trials with proBEAT in the US, and the results that we've had have been extremely good enough that we are now looking at how we scale that, because ultimately the management of type 2 diabetes is a huge problem, and there is still a lot of unmet need out there.
Thanks for that, Foz. Now tell us, how big is the market opportunity for sugarBEAT and proBEAT?
So the market is vast in the sense that in the US, you have currently around, I think I mentioned, around 34 to 35 million people with diabetes. Around 10% of that market is type 1 and around 90% type 2. We are focusing mainly on the type 2 market right now and the pre-diabetes for the reasons I mentioned earlier, whereby that if you think about it, to manage the type 2 space, for example, especially those that are not on intensive insulin therapy, you do not require really a sensor every single day of your lives. And also what we found is from some of the surveys we've done is that, people generally would like to be left to their own devices. They don't want to be lumbered with a device or be stigmatized in any particular way. And so when you've got something that is really just a means of checking how well you are controlling your diabetes a couple of times at the end of the month, is far less intrusive on people's lives. And that is really important, because often we forget, we think that, hey, we've got a great app or we've got a great technology, everybody's going to use it. Well, that's not the case. It has to suit people's lifestyle. It has to be something that people don't find as obtrusive to their lifestyle. And so
sounds extremely promising, Foz. What other products do you have in the development pipeline?
One of the things we have been focusing on is, well, how can we make our glucose monitor more affordable than it already is, but also something that is perhaps a lot easier to use? Like, for example, is there a possibility that we could somehow integrate it with a smartwatch, for example? And so those kind of things that we have been exploring in the background, so that instead of suddenly being available to, let's say, 30 million people with type 2 diabetes, could it suddenly be available to everybody who has a smartwatch, for example? So these are the kind of things that we've been looking at. But in any case, to answer your question in terms of additional analyze, let's say that we are going to measure, there are two key analyses that we have been focusing on, and one that we have already developed the sensors for that I've mentioned in the past. And so for lactate monitoring, and this is in particular initially is in the non-clinical application, is for the purpose of endurance monitoring, athletic performance monitoring. But as we know, once one person has a Fitbit, everybody wants one, and it'll be similar, I guess, here where you can measure your endurance training and your performance capabilities. Then again, is something that most people will potentially want to use. And so we're focusing on the lactate sensor. And the other one, I guess the third one in line, I would say, is the one for cortisol monitoring. And again, it's a stress biomarker. So that's something, though, later in the pipeline. So those are the key areas that we are currently aiming to focus on.
Foz, let us turn now to your business model. How does Nemaura Medical make money?
There are currently three strands. So one is where we have the licensee in the UK, and we have licensees in the Middle East as well, and they're in the process of registering product. And that model is very simple. It's a supplier-based agreement. There's a certain price that we charge for a box of 4 sensors. And of course, we are then not responsible for any of the marketing and sales or anything of that nature, so it keeps our overheads down. The second strand, which is really interesting, and we think is one of the more lucrative opportunities from our perspective, and that is to tie up with companies that are supplying drugs into the market, prescription drugs that are used for the management of diabetes. The idea there being to allow those drug manufacturers to differentiate themselves by saying, well, yes, you've had the drug, but here you go. Here's a sensor, measure how well the drug is actually, how much the drug is actually helping you. And the advantage there is that now what they have is a means of checking the extent to which that medicine is actually helping them. And on that point, we will be talking about this in future in terms of some of the activities that we're doing along those lines, because we do have a license agreement with our UK licensee to roll out one of the drugs that is prescribed widely to people with type 2 diabetes. And to give you an idea, there are around just over 2 million people in Germany and the UK combined that are prescribed this drug every month. Now, our licensee would expect to be able to differentiate with our sensors and get quite a significant chunk of that market. But let's assume for now they took 10% of that market. Well, that equates to us to 200,000 devices and around almost 1 million sensors a month. And that in itself could be anywhere between $25 to $35 million of revenue. So you quickly see how through that method, where there's no hard sell because the drug is already reimbursed and the sensors are free of charge in combination with the drug. And therefore, from our perspective, again, the overheads are low because we don't have marketing sales costs associated with that, because we simply supply in, again, on a supply price basis, and then they would provide it with those medicines. So those are the two key avenues to commercialization that we are looking at right now. And of course, the third is one that we are looking at as a company, which will require overheads in marketing and sales, and that's a direct-to-consumer based on a subscription model. But that's something I won't discuss today because I will leave that for another day.
Nemaura currently has around $15 million in cash. Claus, will you need to raise any additional capital for the sugarBEAT rollout?
As a company, throughout, if you look historically, we've always had a very lean burn rate. And even now, our burn rate is around $1.5 to $1.6 million per quarter. I look around me and I see some of the other tech companies in the field, and they probably burn through that in a week. We've been quite fortunate to be able to manage our costs in that sense. So given that's a burn rate, given that's a cash position, we're in a relatively good position. We did, of course, take down some non-dilutive funding in terms of debt, and we did restructure some of that, and we could restructure. But from our point of view, right now we're looking at revenue generation, and we're looking at servicing some of the debt with that revenue generation. But we're also looking at some of these, let's say, key developments over the coming months to help us also further build a momentum on our stock and the volume in due course.
Claus, I know you have a very distinguished background. You're the CEO of the company. Starting with yourself, could you introduce some of the key players on the Nemaura team?
Sure, yes. By way of training, I originally trained as a drug formulation scientist, and then I did a master's in nanotechnology and microsystems, which has absolutely nothing to do with drug formulation. And then I did a doctorate in nanomedicine. So it's quite a diverse background. And essentially, I'm a technologist at heart. That's what I do. And I'm fortunate enough to be doing what my other passion is, which is the commercial side of things, running a business. And one of the other key, I would say, employees that we have with us right now is our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Arish Gadar. And again, he's an exemplary character as far as I'm concerned from a technical point of view, as well as from an operations management point of view. And he's our Chief Operating Officer right now. And we have been hiring additional people, and we are in the process, for example, right now of hiring a CFO in the US. It's staggering how many applications we received from one simple LinkedIn advert. But there you go. There's a lot of demand, I guess, out there. So over the course of the next few months, we expect to put in place a US-based CFO. And so I say US-based because, of course, we are based in the UK. And then we will have a chief operating officer as well, chief commercial officer, sorry, that we will be hiring in due course. So the team is gradually being built.
In closing, Foz, what is the essential value proposition? Why should investors take an interest in Nemaura Medical right now?
Good question again. And I guess to finish off, so bear in mind that we have the only non-invasive glucose technology that's approved anywhere in the world, on a continuous CGM, that is, that we're aware of. And it's approved here in Europe. And of course, as I mentioned, it's pending FDA review. So that's generally not enough. So what? There are companies out there that have had approvals and then they've sat on their technology forever. The point here is that the technology we've developed has a real tangible value, not only in the field of managing type 2 diabetes. It could be a paradigm shift. It could be in terms of how type 2 is managed. but also in the space of prediabetes, where most people who have prediabetes have not got a clue that they have prediabetes. And I'll give you an example. Within the company, because our colleagues wear these devices, every now and again we wear them and trial them, and we've had no less than like 2 out of 8 people at one point where the spikes were not what they should have been, and they both came out pre-diabetic. Okay, and this is from one day sensor wear. So the point being that you can't, with existing technologies, you simply can't do that. And here is something that is quite empowering in that regard. So the point now is that we're at that point where we are no longer doing R&D, we're commercializing. So we've reached that inflection point. From our point of view, it's a question of how quickly can we scale the commercial operations. And from the point of view of global reach, even in what we have to bear in mind is one of the questions I again get asked is, well, where are we with the FDA and US? Well, let's look at it this way. We have a CE mark device, meaning that we can market the product to 60% of the world. So let's not forget that. And there's a lot to focus on just there. And therefore, that is where we are going to focus on whilst we in parallel work with the FDA.
It's a great story, Foz. Thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thank you.